So let's look at a way to make our output, format our output in a way that looks a lot cleaner. And here's my first example. If you look at the code that we have going on here, we have a constant double pi, and we've got the value for pi, so that's a constant variable. It's all capped to indicate that it's a constant. We have a currency, and I set it to $45. Okay. Very easy to write this string to the console by using the write line, putting in our string literal, whatever we want to print to the console, our concatenator, the plus sign, and then our variable, which then would output the value of that variable. And I put a little dollar sign here to indicate the currency to make that look a little more indicative of what I'm trying to say in that output line. So sure, pi is equal to, well, this isn't lined up very nicely. It isn't very clean. Perhaps I would have just liked to print 3.14 instead of the whole thing. Anyway, let's see what we can do to clean that up a little bit with a format string. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to remove this concatenator, and we're going to put a comma, and I'll show you why in a minute. Alright, so we're going to replace the concatenator with a comma. So now, what I'll do in my string literal here, I'm going to put in what's called a placeholder. And so since there's only one variable that I'm going to be replacing in this sentence, I only need one placeholder, and it starts with the value of 0. So what I'm saying in this sentence is, here's my string literal, but within this placeholder, I've saved a place for this variable pi. So please plug in the variable pi into this placeholder. So I'm going to do the same thing with the currency here. And so now what we've done is pretty much, in essence, it's going to look the same to our console, but we're saying instead of using the concatenator, we're using placeholders, and you'll see why that gets valuable in a minute. Let's just verify that it's all working properly. Okay, so looks pretty much the same. Haven't really accomplished anything yet, but we'll see why that's important here in the next step, or why it's valuable. Okay, so now what I might choose to do is, well, first of all, I decided that I'd like 3 place values for my pi instead of all the long one I had. So what I can do is I can put a colon, and now I can format my output in such a way that's a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to put this as a floating point with 3 decimals. Okay, and I can also do this placeholder, colon, as a currency. C stands for currency. And so now I'm suggesting that I want this variable output in this place, colon, formatted in this way. F stands for floating point, and 3 determines how many decimal points. This next line I'm saying, put the value of currency in this placeholder, colon, and format it as if it is currency. So I'm going to run this. Put it over where you can see it. And so here you see that it automatically put in the dollar sign for me here, so I can get rid of the dollar sign I have in the string. So the string format printed it with the dollar sign, 45 and the 2 decimals automatically. And now I was able to format that output with the 3 decimal places instead of as many as there was in the value. So let's see what we can do to make that a little cleaner. Well, first of all, I'm going to delete the dollar sign I hard-coded in there and allow the C to put in that dollar sign. So that's good. But let's take this a step further. Let's also, I'm just going to type it first and then put a value, and so you'll see what I'm doing afterwards. So after the 0 placeholder, I put a comma 25. And so what I'm saying here is, whatever value goes into this placeholder, comma, needs to take up 25 spaces, colon, and this is how you're going to format it, as a floating point 3. So whatever value pi contains, if it only has 3 digits or 20 digits, it needs to take up 25 spaces in my console output. So let's look and see what that looks like. Okay, so it did exact as hard to tell, but what's happened then is after pi is equal quits, the next 25 spaces is going to be taken up by the length of the value that I'm trying to input, or trying to output, excuse me. So 3.142 takes up 3 decimals, 4 plus the 3 decimal places, plus the decimal, plus the 3. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. And this then, in essence, is 15 spaces. So 15 plus 5 is the 20 I specified for the output. And so the same thing happened here. The currency is 45 took up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the remainder of that 25 is being taken up after currency is this string ends. Well, that's a start, but it's still not lining up very nicely. So let's see what we can do to clean that up even more. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, little jiggery pokery, I'm going to cut this string out. And I'm going to put in a placeholder, 0, 25. And then I'm going to put in here, I'm going to put it all in and then explain what I've done. Okay, so, and I need to change this to 1. All right, so now what I'm doing is creating a sentence, so to speak. So in this quote, here's what I want you to print. The first placeholder, I want to take up 25 spaces. And so in that 25 spaces, I'm going to put in this string. It could be a variable, it can be whatever you want. But I'm going to use it with this string, pi is equal string, and that needs to go in this first placeholder, and that placeholder needs to take up 25 spaces. After that's done being printed to the console, the next placeholder, which is going to be pi, is also going to take up 25 spaces, and then it's also going to be formatted with the F3, so with 3 floating point. So let me do the same thing to this next line. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to make a placeholder 0, 25. The next placeholder needs to be a 1, so I'm going to change that to 1. And then for the first placeholder where that 0 placeholder is, I'm going to put in a string, comma, and then currency. So now I have 2 columns that are being created with 25 spaces. That's going to be filled with these 2 descriptive strings. And then the second placeholders are going to be filled in with the values that are in the variables. So let's take a look and see that one. All right, things are looking a little bit better, except that I don't really like the fact that these are right aligned. I prefer them to be left aligned over here. That makes a little bit more sense. But these are right aligned within their spacing, and so that looks good. I'm happy with that, but I would prefer that these were left aligned. So that would make that a little cleaner. So if I come into the placeholder for the strings, and I have the 25, if I put in a negative 25, that says, please take up 25 spaces, but left align this string instead. So now if I print this out, move this over so you can see it, things are looking much cleaner. I'd probably move my spacing in a little bit, but it just gives you a good visual, which was the goal. So now my text is left aligned, but my numbers are right aligned, and everything's looking a lot cleaner than it was when we first started. So use these print formatting to make some cleaner looking output. Remember then that the way it works is you have the first digit is your placeholder, 0 or 1. Then it's followed by a comma, and you allocate how many spaces you want this placeholder to contain. So this 0 should contain 25 spaces. And then furthermore, in the next example where I have placeholder 1 that takes up 25 spaces, colon, this information that follows the colon is how you want that variable formatted. So in this case, I have it formatted with the C, or currency, and in the case above, I have it formatted with a floating point that has 3 decimal places, or 2 decimal places, or whatever you might want to have. The floating point also would put in commas for you. So if you had thousandths place, it would automatically add the comma. So that's ways to make your output look much prettier and a little bit more pride of ownership, a little cleaner.